Hello, welcome to American Dream Latin Souls. I'm Daniel Ortiz, and today my guest is entrepreneur, playwright, and screenwriter Patricia Crespin. Patricia, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Patricia, you're in a unique type of business. You're in the arts.
Yes.
You're a screenwriter and filmmaker, or screenwriter and playwright.
Yes.
You create films and plays based on the Latino experience.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. So we're going to talk about that, and you've actually had a film that's been produced. It's very exciting, and you've had several others that are in the project. So the first question we have is, what is your American dream, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I think it's evolved from when I was a child. You know, it was much more grandiose when I was younger. You know, fame, money, you know, a lot of wealth and, you know, houses everywhere. Okay. But now I think it's sort of shrunk to, you know, having financial security. Being able to, there's this great line that Joseph Campbell uses that I like to use a lot also, following my bliss, you know, being able to
follow your bliss, and doors will
bliss.
open where you didn't know they were going to be.
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly. So doing what I love, writing, producing, filmmaking, and having the financial security to do that, you know, not in a grand way, but in a secure way, I think.
So now your screenwriting and your films are based on the Latino or Latina experience.
Yes.
Is that right? So
yes.
tell me about that generally, and how did you come to that, and is that how did you choose that as a specific niche in your work?
I think, you know, I've always had this idea that, you know, we have these wonderful characters in the Latino culture. You know, you have your older grandmother who's
I was going to say, your family is always, we have extended families, right?
Yes.
And there's always characters.
There is. And I always saw, you know, I grew up loving film, loving the performing arts. And so I've always been very aware of my surroundings and the people that exist in my surroundings. You know, so I'm always catching characters here and there. Oh, I could use that person in a play. I could use that person in a movie. So having that background and, you know, having these wild family gatherings all the time, just I had an abundance of material, you know, to use. So my first play that I wrote, it was called We Are Hispanic American Women, okay? And I just had all these wonderful
okay, not no, but okay.
Like, okay, yeah, like, you got a problem with that?
Okay.
And so I just had, you know, these wonderful, strong female characters, which, you know, as you know, you probably know growing up, there's these wonderful, strong women in the Hispanic community that I drew from and created a whole story about. Okay.
So you're how old when you started this first endeavor?
I was fairly old. I was in my early 30s.
Oh, that's old.
I guess. Yeah, that's old, right? But older than, you know, like in my 20s, I was too busy having fun to really care too much about.
So you developed
this
dream to later in life, you know, and I think a lot of people do that. You know, in their 20s, even in your 30s, you're looking for that American dream, but we follow the traditional American path. You know, chasing money, chasing success, chasing after, you know, things that are out there. And then we come to this epiphany, I know I did later in my life, where the richness is in our own backyard, is in our culture.
It is, exactly.
And it's creating something, you know, whether it's literally through the characters in our family, or through the abundance of entrepreneurs that I share with the public. So, okay, so that's part of the journey. And you've obviously, I've read Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Yes. Yes, that's one of my favorites, but my absolute favorite that I always have to go back to is The Power of Myth.
The Power of Myth.
Yeah,
okay, telling stories.
I really love the way he sort of combines, you know, the different cultures and how we all sort of have this similar connection and these similar heroes and mythological characters that we all worship and care about.
Well, Joseph Campbell's was probably one of the preeminent teachers of the 20th century, I believe, because he first found that in every culture and every society, you know, going back tens of thousands of years, there's myth with a hero. Right. And the hero is us.
Right, exactly. The journey and the hero is
the hero's journey
within us. Exactly.
Within us. And in fact, Hollywood films are full of the hero's journey. I mean, all the great films, Wizard of Oz.
Not Star Trek, Star Wars.
Star Wars, of course.
Right, The Godfather.
The Godfather. It's all the hero's journey, if you can see that mythical pattern.
Right.
So you've taken that,
monomyth, I've taken that.
And you've applied it to the Latino community. That's wonderful.
Absolutely. It applies wonderfully, too. You know, there's all the different characters that hero, that protagonist needs, along his journey.
Okay, so tell our audience basically what is the hero's journey.
Well, for me, I think it basically sort of exists more in my writing for the female.
Okay.
Rather than
there's
the
a
male.
hero and heroine as
right,
well.
exactly.
Right.
So I do tend to.
And I believe that the American dream really is an aspect of that, or a calling of that hero's journey.
Of that journey, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're all sort of called on a journey to achieve whatever our bliss may be, whether it's hunting for a ton of money, or whether it's just doing what you love and waking up every day and enjoying that.
And there's a calling. We're called to it.
We are, and I was definitely called to writing. And I like to I like to call myself a storyteller, because I think that there are also many stories that need to be told in the Hispanic culture, especially for the women. We sort of lived in strength, but in silence also. I can recall all these women, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, who were just these very strong, powerful women, but were pretty quiet. But they all had a story, they all had a hidden secret, or they all had a certain something that was there, that was underlying, that they never spoke about. And I think that's something that I can do for them at this point, is to tell their stories, whether they're good or bad. And a lot of them aren't that good, and I've had a lot of backlash. I've, as a writer, I do like to communicate with my audience and get their feedback on what I'm doing and how they feel about it. And I've had a lot of backlash, a lot of anger, a lot of happiness, and laughter as well.
Well, you're breaking a mold a lot of ways.
I am breaking a mold, and it's very common in my experience in the Latino culture to sort of shy away from things that are very heavy, heavy subjects that aren't very easy to talk about. And I talk about them unapologetically, and with.
Well, tell us about some of the plays and then the film that you were involved with that's airing now.
Well, one of my most successful plays is an adaptation of the Greek Medea.
Okay.
And I chose, I wrote the play for a class, and it just sort of evolved into this really successful thing.
Now, Medea in classical
Greek mythology,
is
yes.
What?
She is the sorceress who is dating this man. They have children together, but he's on a much different level. He wants success and money. He wants to live well. So he leaves her for the king's daughter, and in her anger, she murders their sons and takes off on a chariot, to another land. Well, it was very easy for me growing up, in northern New Mexico, to make that connection to La Llorona, who I love the story of La Llorona. She was, what kept me good as a child. She's the stories I told. So
La Llorona is a iconic story in New Mexico, but some of our audience, are not from New Mexico. So tell us the story of La Llorona. Because I remember growing up and, of course, being afraid of La Llorona as well.
The story differs a little bit depending on what region you're in, but it's basically the same thing. It's this woman who's beautiful. She is in love with this man. They father a couple of children, or a couple of kids together. And then he decides to leave her for a more prominent woman, whose father is more successful.
In my version, I always heard that the children die.
Yes.
She's crying. That's why they call it La Llorona.
Right, well, she murders them.
She's searching.
Oh, that they die on their own?
I don't remember how they died, but...
Right. Well, in the story that I've heard, she murders them. She drowns them in the river. And then in her grief and, when she realizes what she's done, she murders herself. And so her ghost, her spirit, sort of wanders the
La Llorona literally means the crier,
the crying
who's
woman.
crying woman. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So
heavy stuff.
Very heavy, very heavy. And so I, combined those two mythologies, took a little bit of the Hispanic flavor, a little bit of the Greek flavor, and wrote a play about it. And it's been fairly successful. One of my biggest problems with it is explaining to people who this woman is, because some people don't understand the Greek mythology part of it, and some people have no clue who La Llorona is.
What is this play called?
It's called the Medea Complex.
The Medea Complex, okay. So, that's part of why myth works, is because someone may not understand it at a conscious level, but at a subconscious level, they get something in that character.
They do.
It reaches our soul. And that's why I think a lot of the Greek mythology endures to this day.
Exactly.
Is because, whether it's Medea or Oedipus or Odysseus, You know,
Exactly.
we all recognize an aspect of ourselves in those characters.
Exactly.
Would you agree?
I completely agree. You wouldn't think that it would be easy to empathize with a woman who's murdered her children. But when you hear the story, specifically in the Medea complex, you can't help but empathize with her at the end of the play. And I think that's why it's been so successful. And not just in the Latino culture, but in other cultures as well.
And this is playing throughout the U.S. or locally?
Well, so far it has been seen in Los Angeles. Here in New Mexico, it's toured. I'm working on getting it up in New York and getting it published. And it's looking like I'm going to be publishing it myself through this company that I've just become involved in.
Okay.
But
technology,
I think it will be a very successful, most successful play to date.
I can see that. And with technology now, you can publish yourself. You don't need to go through the middleman of publishers. I've done that for my books, and I highly recommend it.
Oh, yeah.
You have more control.
So much easier, exactly.
So that's a good segue into, I'm going to talk about the business and being an entrepreneur. You actually are creative. You're a playwright, and you write a screenwriter as well, so you write. But it's a business, right?
It is a business, absolutely, and a tough one at that. Extremely tough. And I think that's been my biggest struggle with being an entrepreneur and being my own, selling myself and my work, is that I'm very creative, very artistic, but business-wise, that has been my toughest area to. And you're going to find that to learn how to sell my product, to have the ability to talk about myself in a very positive way. I'm a great writer. I could do it all day on paper, but doing it face to face with someone has been a very challenging thing for me. And you will find that with any entrepreneur, whether it's in the creative arts like you are, or if you invent a product, marketing. It comes down to sales and marketing, and not all entrepreneurs really revel in that. I mean, it's part of the business they just don't want to deal with. So you got to partner up with somebody. You got to find ways to make it happen. Exactly. Okay. Exactly. So. So far, I haven't been lucky enough to find a partner. So and then there's some days, I just want to sit and write all day, and I have all these ideas, and I just want to, hide away and write. But when that creative genie comes out, you can't put it back. Exactly. Right. Exactly. The one idea begets another idea. Balancing those two has been incredibly difficult. I got my film into this thing called the Latino Media Market. And it's sponsored by NALIP, the National Association for Latino Independent Producers. So I got in and going, I was even with a producer who had optioned my work, and just trying to sell to, those people have 5 minutes to give you, and that's it. And so, pitch them. To give them a pitch. And so coming up with that pitch and not stumbling over my words, and it was a great experience. It was my first experience. I probably made a lot of mistakes. But it was. What you learned from the experience. It was priceless. And that's not really any different, really, from an inventor pitching investors or angel investors. Right. I need $1 million for X, Y, Z. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in creative arts or if you sell a product. Right. You got to learn to pitch. We call it an elevator pitch. Right. In the business, you got to tell somebody your idea in the length of time it takes in an elevator to go from one floor to another floor. I like that idea. That's about right. So by the time you get out, they say, "Wow!" And here, right. So it focuses the mind. Exactly. Right. You got to focus the mind. So okay, that's a challenge, and that's always a challenge for entrepreneurs: is selling themselves, selling their story, selling their product. Right. And you get better at it as you go along. Right. And success will breed success. I think so. Okay. So you have a film that's out. Yes, tell us about that. It was based on it's called Before We Say Goodbye. It was originally titled We Are Hispanic American Women. Okay, it was based on my very first stage play. What happened was we were producing it for a theater conference, and there was a small producer there who loved the story. He immediately approached me and asked me if he could option it and hire me as a co-writer for the screenplay. So we worked out the details, and eventually. So we continuously searched for financial backing, got some here and there. He ended up deciding to produce the whole thing himself, him and his wife. She was an executive for Universal Studios. So we did it. It held onto the title for a very long time. Through the filming, we went to Mexico, we filmed at the pyramids, we filmed in Cuernavaca. It was just a really wonderful experience. And it was my dream, my goal to hold on to that title. But there were so many people who were afraid of the term Hispanic.
Really?
Especially in the film industry.
Wow,
you know,
still?
Still.
How long ago was this?
2009, I think we were really struggling for it.
So they just didn't think a film with Hispanic in the title would sell?
They did not think it would work, exactly. And to this day,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still having trouble convincing people that the Latino experience will sell, still to this day.
Yeah.
But so after a huge battle with me and the producers and the financiers, they finally decided to change it to Before We Say Goodbye. And then, you know, the consolation for me was, but we're going to dub it in Spanish and Portuguese, and so, you know, we'll still call it Antes de Decir Adios in certain areas.
Right.
And, you know, we have released it in Latin America and Mexico, and but it was kind of heartbreaking to let go of the title.
Sure, sure.
But to get a film produced and picked up by Universal Studios, it was sort of a...
That's what's exciting, especially for a small town girl from New Mexico.
But
to do
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Well, and you know, you're following your bliss.
I am
and
following
doors
my
open,
bliss,
right?
Right, and it's not always easy. You know, yeah, it has its ups and its downs, its highs and its lows.
Okay,
but
so
it's definitely wonderful.
Let's talk about that. I'm going to talk about your Hispanic cultural roots and the values that you grew up with. What kind of values that you grew up with that are helping you today persevere in this difficult business?
I think the best value that I got out of my my culture growing up was probably the hard-working woman. You know, my mom was from an age that, you know, she had 5 children. She worked tirelessly, you know, all the time. She was always working. I remember that. Always cranky too, but she was always working. You know, she
working
never
in and out of the house, or
in and out of the house, right? Keeping the house together. You know, making sure she was home for dinner, but also working a full-time job. She was a probation officer, you know, for years and years. So just seeing that it was perfectly acceptable to go to work and be this working woman and still have her family. You know, for me, it's very different. I'm a single mother, and she had my dad there, but just complete dedication to a job. You know, I'm not 100% sure if that was her bliss and her calling, but she did seem to love her job, and she worked hard at it. And
that's a current theme that I see with Hispanics, and especially with our culture. We have a strong work ethic.
Very strong work ethic.
You know, in America, we talk about the Puritan work ethic. Well, I think Hispanics are more Puritan than the Puritans when it comes to work ethic.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I saw a comedian, you know, joke around about how, you know, they always perceive Hispanics as lazy. They, you know, paint them sleeping, taking a siesta somewhere.
Right.
That's total old Hollywood.
Right.
I'm like, we're the hardest workers ever. I mean,
yeah.
So I think that's the best thing I got out of it, is never giving up. You know, even when I fall on my face, and I have a zillion times, but just getting back up and keep going.
Okay. So what would you share to Latinas out there looking at this film or looking at this interview, and you know they have that? You know, I always say that Hispanics live in 2 worlds. We live in the traditional American culture. We also have the Hispanic culture, but I think Latinas maybe live in 3 worlds, because you have this American culture, Hispanic culture, but then the Hispanic women's culture is a little bit different as well.
Different. So, I think I would, you know, just
Or has it changed? Is it from traditional roles of, you know, staying at home and
I think it's changed a lot, but it's also, I mean, there seems to be a little bit of a shift in the younger generation, not my generation, but the generation under me, where, you know, it's the women are going to work and the men are taking care of the children, that kind of stuff. But I think we still have it sort of embedded in our brains from, you know, centuries ago, where we have to make sure that the family's taken care of. Even if we have this job, you know, we got to rush home and make sure that that's all,
right.
You know, everything's good in the home, you
Right,
know.
right.
And it might just be a pride thing that, you know, if we don't have it all balanced and taken care of, then we're not doing our job.
Value.
You know,
exactly. Families are our core value.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's difficult in our culture. You know, there's a pull to follow your bliss. I know my bliss was, at the time when I wasn't married, otherwise I couldn't have done it, was to quit my job as a stockbroker and buy a one-way ticket to Spain.
Oh, awesome. That sounds like a good bliss.
It was. I was called there. I just could not do this. I sold my house, and I can't imagine anybody with, you know, family doing that. But at the time, you know, I wasn't. So that worked. So, but sometimes following your bliss entails leaving home, leaving family.
It does.
Even if you're a young kid and you've got a Latino kid, you get a college scholarship, you know, across the country.
Right.
that's not a slam dunk.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
that
exactly.
decision is based on the impact on the family as a whole, or even say you do graduate from college and you get a job offer across the country.
Right.
Not so easy, is
Right.
it?
Exactly. I think, you know, there's been times that I've had to leave my son behind to go do things, you know, when I went to film in Mexico, I couldn't take him with me. That was very hard on him and me, but I knew it was for the best.
Sure.
And there's been times that I've taken him with me and been breastfeeding, you know, in meetings, in classes, and or you know, on set. And you know, a lot of people sort of shy away from that, but didn't faze me. I was either or. You know, either way, I was going to do what I wanted to do, whether my son was with me or not. And so I hope that I'm influencing other Latinas to know that it's okay, and to be fearless, you know, whether they have children or not. And I hope I'm influencing my son to know that.
But definitely impacting your son as well.
Right.
So I'm noticing on your T-shirt you have Wise Latina. What's that about?
Yes. Well, when Sonia Sotomayor won her spot in the Supreme Court, they sold these shirts.
Okay.
And of course, I was very proud of that. We've come a long way. We have, especially in film and in the
spotlight. It seems like it's been overnight success, but it is a long journey.
It is a long journey, and it's still, you know, I can still maybe count, you know, on my 2 hands the number of Latinos in the film industry that you can actually hire and pay a lot of money to. So it's a work in progress.
So we got about a minute left. So
Okay.
what advice would you give to any Latina or Latino out there who maybe wants to follow their bliss? Maybe it's in film, maybe it's in the arts, but they have a calling. What advice would you give to them?
I would say be diligent. Don't be afraid to fall a million times and get back up. Take the word no gracefully, because sometimes that no at that point will be a yes later on if people see that you are determined to be successful. I've been told no a million times, and it used to really break my heart, but eventually I got used to it and became very graceful about it. And it's helped me.
Okay.
And learn from your mistakes every chance you get, because that's
Don't
the
be
best way
afraid
to
to
learn.
make mistakes, right?
Don't be afraid to make them. No,
right.
that's how you learn. It's wonderful.
All right, great. Good advice. Patricia,
you.
thank you for sharing your American dream with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having
And we
me.
wish you much success in your film career.
Okay.
And I want to thank our audience for joining us on American Dream Latin Souls. Be sure to visit us on the web at latinosuccess.com.